welcome to Culture on I-24 News. I'm Oded Grober, and today we have a wonderful show for you. We'll talk to Moshe Morad, author of a book about gay culture and music in Cuba. A look at young Israeli designer Hed Mayner. And we'll hear about two music documentaries that will screen at South by Southwest. Dr. Moshe Morad is an ethnomusicologist and the director of Israeli radio station 88 FM. Morad is an expert in world music who also visited Cuba many times, which resulted in the book Fiesta de 10 Pesos, Music and Gay Identity in Special Period Cuba. I'm very happy to have him here in our studio. Thanks for coming in, Moshe.
Hi, Oded. Thanks for inviting me. Great pleasure to be here.
We'll see about that. Tell me a little bit.
I'm enjoying it already.
Already? Okay, maybe we should stop here and quit while we're ahead. No, but I want to hear from you about Cuba, which is in the headlines these days because of Obama's move and the renewed relationship between the U.S. and Cuba. But I want to hear what's Cuba for you.
Well, it's a fascinating place to start with for everyone. It's difficult to say what it is for me because there's so many emotions involved and experience. First time I went there was in '94, in the height of the financial crisis. And I got there, by chance. I was always fascinated with Cuba because it was the forbidden place. It was the other place for Israelis, and communists. And obviously I grew on the image of Che Guevara and the Cuban Revolution. And I was on a work trip to Jamaica. We were recording an artist there. And then I saw a flight from Montego Bay to Havana. I took the flight, and that's how it all started. Well, when I got there, I found a deserted airport, streets that were deserted. There was no lights and power cuts every few minutes, no food, and amazing people. I fell in love with the people, and in spite of the poverty, I think probably the main asset of Cuba and the most amazing thing in Cuba is the people. It's also the music and the tobacco and everything.
As an ethnomusicologist, you must have been drawn to the music that exists.
Well, I loved Cuban or Latin music to start with, so that's obviously was one of the first, one of the few reasons for me to try and catch this plane to Havana. But I discovered a whole world involving people, involving underground activities, in a very, very special and unique society. That's a very generalized
No, so
statement,
let's try to be more focused. Let's get to your book, Music and Gay Identity in Special Period Cuba, and why gays? I mean, what's the relation between gays and music?
I mean, I think this is what many people ask. What's the relationship? Also, when I decided to do my PhD research on that, there's, what's the relationship now? And what's so special about the music in the gay scene? Now, the music is the same. I'm talking about music, I'm talking about music as opposed to the actual music, which means music as a tool.
What does it represent? What does it do?
Exactly. As a world to create space in a society which does not have space, or during that time did not have spaces for interaction, for any kind, for identity. I mean, a world to create a space to create identity. And I actually discovered, which is part of my obsession in different societies as well, and in different minorities,
Right. We should say that gay culture in Cuba is totally underground.
Of course. I'll tell you in a moment about it. But I was saying that even now, I researched music as a space among illegal immigrants in Israel, for example. So what I'm saying, it fascinates me how music can create a space for identity for people who don't have the possibility to project this identity.
To claim their space.
Yeah. So now that's a very general thing. Now I'll talk about what happened. I got to Cuba and I got out from the hotel, and to start with, at that time, you couldn't even leave your hotel without being followed by a policeman or by, just to protect you from the locals. And then I discovered a really dark park outside of the hotel, and I decided maybe there I can meet some real people, as opposed without the police looking for me or for them or for our interaction. At that time, even walking with the Cuban in the street was difficult for him because.
Right.
You know, the Cuban spotted with a tourist would be stopped, asked for papers and all that.
Right.
And through some people I met, I discovered the so-called gay, not community, because you can't call it a community or not even scene, but they call it in Cuba the ambiente, which is a code word for the ambience.
Yeah.
And we got to a section in the Malecon, which is the seaside promenade in Cuba, which was deserted. I mean, the whole Malecon at that time.
Okay.
But there's a certain section with a lot of activity going on in the dark. People sitting, talking, gay people, straight people, transvestites, for the whole lot.
Wow.
And then through meeting some people, I managed to get to some underground parties called Fiestas de 10 Pesos.
Okay.
After obviously the price of the fiesta for a Cuban, for the tourist it was different.
A little more.
At that time, the first year of my my first visits to Cuba, there weren't many tourists.
What change did you see over time? Because you visited Cuba many times. You covered how long? 12 years or so?
Yeah, during 12 years. The first time I went there, well, I started the research in 95. First time I went on 94, and then I said, next year I'm coming and I'm starting researching this fantastic place and very intriguing.
So what happened?
And then I ended the research. I ended, in fact, my field work in 2007, which was symbolically the year also that Fidel Castro stepped down from power. And there were a lot of changes. I mean, some people, outsiders, they maybe didn't like these changes because suddenly the island opened to tourism, and there were more tourists and more hustling going between locals and tourists.
Right.
But I think these changes are the fascinating thing, because I'm interested in change as well. I mean, part of what I'm describing in this book and on my research was the change that occurred and the interaction between locals and tourists, or as they call it, foreigners, extranjeros, and these interactions in some unique spaces which are discovered, which are musical spaces.
Right.
And
if you can, very quickly, because we're almost out of time, can you guess where Cuba is going to go now with this great change that is coming?
It's difficult to tell. I can tell you I'm in contact with a lot of Cuban friends and people in Cuba, and it's not as clear as it seems. People were saying, oh, the moment the gates will open, it will become a second. I don't think it will become a second Miami. I think there's something really deep Cuban in Cuba, which will remain that.
So
but it will
some
open.
Of the charm will stay. Hopefully, some of the poverty maybe will
but you see, a lot of sometimes outsiders, they like to see the old cars. They want to keep it as it was, which is not necessarily what's good for the locals. So I think there's a mix that will come. Music-wise, and that's the main thing about the book, it's an amazing place, Cuba, and I discovered through my research. I went into ceremonies of Afro-Cuban Santeria with drumming and spirit possession.
It sounds incredible.
An amazing world.
I would love to hear more, but unfortunately we're out of time. Moshe, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you for inviting me.
Moving on now to Hed Mayner is a young Israeli designer who took part in the recent Paris Fashion Week. His clothes are loose and comfortable, and his style combines simplicity and elegance. Sandy Fortis went to meet him and brought back this story.
In his early 30s, Hed Mayner, a young Israeli designer, is already beginning to break into the world of high fashion. In January, he presented his first collection at the Paris Fashion Week. He sold the collection to 4 major Japanese and New York stores.
Paris, and that's what's very nice about it, is that they are open for designers that are coming from outside.
Born in Mitzpe Amuka, a small village in northern Israel, Hed Mayner left his hometown to study at the prestigious Bezalel Academy in Jerusalem. 4 years later, he went to Paris to study at the French Institute of Fashion, but he finds his inspiration in Jerusalem.
I was missing the intensity, that there is here in the Middle East, this tension. So yeah, I missed that, and also all the cultural references. And yeah, I really felt then that Jerusalem was the center of the world, like a center, some kind of heart for all that influenced all the things that happen, if it's like cultural aspect or spiritual aspect.
A state of mind which is reflected in his collection. Mayner mixes elegant tailoring with a military twist. Loose, comfortable clothes that fit all body types.
I guess it's just something I see around all the time. The military pieces, you see it everywhere. You go to the bus, if you take the bus, you see uniform all the time.
In his workshop, Mayner has dozens of books on the history of the Jewish people, or rather on their outfits, another source of inspiration for the young designer.
I'm inspired by the Jewish, like the Orthodox tailoring, which is very oversized and is more about wrapping the body rather than shaping it.
Good fabrics, a sharp technique, lightness. Hed Mayner created clothes that he himself would wear. That's what he has been doing since he was 16. Son of a metal worker and a painter, Hed Mayner grew up in a house full of art and creativity. He discovered fashion on his own.
I was not really related to that in the beginning, but then around my teens, I started studying sewing and pattern making and hand stitch from a lady next to our village. And then I gained quite a lot of skills, but then there was a point when it's combined with the fashion.
Today, Mayner is dedicated to fulfilling the orders made in Paris, but he's already thinking about his next collection. His goal, to continue doing what he loves and see people wearing his designs.
I want to stay, I want to be based in Israel, of course, and I want to be all over the world with what I do, and to have an exposure to what I do, and to have audience.
In a moment, we'll hear about 2 new music documentaries, but first, our cultural recommendation for the day.
Six female artists from the Arab Muslim world who can tell about the madness of men through their works, gathered at the Institute of Islamic Cultures by Miket Krifa, the curator of the exhibition. Gohar Dashti, Shadi Gadirian, and others denounced the impact that the violence of war has had on their lives. From Egypt, Iran, the Palestinian territories, and Jordan, they all chose the home life as theme for their works. Iranian Gohar Dashti, for example, chose to stage a young couple performing household chores like hanging clothes. The bizarre difference is that they do it on barbed wires and in an open battlefield. Paintings, photos, and videos, there are many ways to tell a surreal reality in this exhibition.
And now Daniel Campos is joining me in the studio, I should say. Campos, our world music expert. We're combining now music and film, right?
Yeah, we're going to talk about the soundtrack of East Harlem and the South Bronx in the 1960s and 70s, the Boogaloo.
The Boogaloo.
Yeah, a new great documentary. It's called We Like It Like That. That's the name of one of the lyrics of one of the most famous songs of this genre, Bang Bang, of Joe Cuba. And this documentary looks absolutely amazing. It's by Matthew Ramirez.
Okay.
And I mean, it's I don't know how to explain to you. It's the music that was born from the combination of R&B, funk, soul, the Latin
I see
sounds.
your excitement, and I want to feel it as well. Let's take a look and see if I feel it then.
Boom, 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 bing, boom, bing, boom, ding, bing, boom, ding, bing, ding. Okay, that's the lick. Ah, beep, beep. Ah, beep, beep. Bang, bang. Ah! He said, we're going to record this.
There was something
All right, now I can see why you're so excited. It looks really, really cool.
You know, actually, the song we just heard, Bang Bang, has been featured in the soundtrack of the Wolf of Wall Street, the movie Chef. It's used in a lot of movies. It's one of the most famous boogaloo tunes.
So it's a genre that started in the 60s and the 70s and now is what, coming back?
It's coming back, just like you said. It was forgotten for a while. It was very popular. Look, Jews loved it in New York. You know, the African Americans, the Puerto Ricans, the Cubans, everyone. It
And
was
you can
born
see
from
it
the melting
in South by Southwest, right? And it's not the only music documentary you have for us.
Absolutely. We have one, Your Music. That's the name of the documentary from Thailand.
Thai music, something that we don't hear that much about usually.
Absolutely. We tend to hear more about the party scene and the full moon party and all of this. But it also has a very interesting music scene, psychedelic rock.
Looks super interesting. Thanks so much, Daniel.
Thank you, Hed.
We're done for today. I hope you enjoyed our show. We'll be back tomorrow for another one. So please join us again.